Hey everyone, so you clicked on this video because you want to learn how to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. In this video, I'm going to show you the really easy steps on how you can do that. If you want to learn a different method on how to solve the quadratic equations using the factoring method, click on this link up here to learn how. On the other hand, if you want to learn how to solve systems of equations using a linear equation and a quadratic equation, click on this link up here and I'm going to show you how to do that. Otherwise, keep watching this video and let's learn about the quadratic formula. My name is Peter, grab your calculator and let's get started. The objective for today is to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. A general quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. And so we want to look for these coefficients a, b, and c and plug them into the quadratic formula that's shown here on the right side. I'm going to show you some tips that are going to make this process a little bit easier. The first thing that you need to do is to arrange the terms in standard form. Standard form means that the first term is the squared term, the second term is the linear term, and the third term is the constant. Number 2, factor if possible. Some quadratic equations can be factored by looking for the greatest common factor. Number 3, identify the coefficients a, b, and c. And then finally, use the quadratic formula to find x using the 3 coefficients that you found a, b, and c. Now let's work on some examples. In the first example we're going to look at, it's going to be a basic quadratic equation. It's going to be x squared plus 14x plus 45 equals to 0. The first thing we need to do is to check and make sure that the equation is properly organized. So the squared term, the linear term, and then the constant. The second thing we need to do is to check and see if it's possible to factor this quadratic equation. In this particular example, we don't need to do that. So we're going to go ahead to the next step and then start to use the quadratic formula to solve it. I need to identify a, b, and c. A is 1, b is 14, and c is 45. So once I know that, I'm going to use the quadratic formula x equals to negative b, so it's going to be negative 14, plus or minus square root of b squared, which is 14 squared, minus 4 times 1, 4, and also times 45 inside parentheses. And then we're going to divide that by 2 times 1 because our a is 1. And then the next step is now we need to simplify what's inside the square root. So I'm going to just write copy and paste negative 14 plus or minus. 14 squared is 196. Negative 4 times 1 times 45 is equal to negative 180 divided by 2. And then negative 14 plus or minus. Now once you subtract 196 minus 180, you get 16. So we're going to put the square root sign and 16 inside, and the denominator stays the same as 2. So the next step, we simplify our square root. So we'll have negative 14 plus or minus 4 divided by 2. And then at this step here, now we need to find the 2 solutions. Because we have plus or minus, we have to solve 2 equations. So the first one is going to be negative 14 plus 4 divided by 2, or x equals to negative 14 minus 4 divided by 2. We're going to solve the equation on the left side, and when you add negative 14 plus 4, it's going to be negative 10 divided by 2, and when you simplify that, you get x equals to negative 5. We also need to simplify the other side, so negative 14 minus 4 is negative 18. Divided by 2, you end up with x equals to negative 9. And these are the solutions for this quadratic equation. In the second example, we're going to look at factoring and then using the quadratic formula. If you have a quadratic expression that's kind of complicated, it might be easier to look for a common factor to make it simpler and then use the quadratic formula. So let's see how this is going to work out in this particular example. So we have 6x squared minus 48x minus 54. 6, 48, and 54 have a common factor, and that common factor is the number 6. You can factor out the number 2, but it's not the greatest common factor. So when you factor out 6, you're going to end up with x squared minus 8x minus 9 equals to 0. So when you divide both sides by 6, you end up with x squared minus 8x minus 9 equals to 0. So this expression here, it's a little bit simpler to work with than the one that we had at the beginning. So now we need to identify a, b, and c. A is 1, b is negative 8, and c is negative 9. So we're going to take those three numbers and plug them into our quadratic formula. And it's going to be x is equal to negative, inside parentheses, negative 8. And the reason why there are two negative signs is because our b here is already negative 8. And then plus or minus square root negative 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 9 close parentheses divided by 2 times positive 1. So notice I'm using parentheses to indicate that the numbers that are inside are negative. So we're going to continue the next step by simplifying the two negative signs here, and we're going to have positive 8 because negative and negative makes this number positive, and then inside the square root we're going to have 64 plus 36 divided by 2. 64 plus 36 equals to 100. So inside the square root here, we can simplify this because it has a good square root, and we're going to have 10. So our next expression here, we're only going to change, we're going to substitute the square root sign with the 10. X equals to 8 plus or minus 10 divided by 2. Once we reach here, we're going to have two answers. So one is going to be plus 10 and the other one is going to be minus 10. So x is equal to 8 plus 10 divided by 2, or x equals to 8 minus 10 divided by 2. We're going to solve the left side and then we'll solve the right side. When you add 8 plus 10, you get 18 divided by 2. That means x equals to positive 9. The other solution is going to be 8 minus 10, which is negative 2 divided by 2. That means x equals to negative 1. And these two are the solutions of this quadratic equation. In the third example, we need to rewrite the equation and then use the quadratic formula. The problem says x squared plus 6x minus 10 equals to 30. So we notice that on the right side here, we have a number instead of 0. So we need to move this positive 30 over to the left side. When you move that number over to the left side, it changes from a positive 30 to a negative 30. And when you add that negative 30 to the negative 10, you get negative 40 equals to 0. We check our equation here and we see that it's written in standard form, so we need to identify a, b, and c. A is 1, b is 6, and c is negative 40. So I'm going to take those three numbers and plug them into my quadratic formula. So the formula is going to be x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 40 divided by 2 times 1. And then now I need to simplify the numbers inside the square root. I'll have negative 6 plus or minus 36 plus 160. So when you multiply negative 4 times negative 40, you get a positive number. And in the denominator, you get 2. So negative 6 remains the same. Plus or minus, we add 36 plus 160 and we get 196, and then divide by the 2, which does not change. The next step, we simplify the square root. Negative 6 plus or minus 14 divided by 2. So once you have plus or minus here, it means that we're going to have two answers. So the first calculation is going to be x equals to negative 6 plus 14 divided by 2, or x equals to negative 6 minus 14 divided by 2. So let's solve the left side here. X equals to positive 8 divided by 2, and then when you divide those two numbers, you get positive 4. Now let's solve the right side. Negative 6 minus 14, you get negative 20 divided by 2, and that simplifies to negative 10. So these are the two solutions for that quadratic equation. All right, here's the final question, and in this question we need to rewrite and then factor and then use the quadratic formula. So the question says 4x squared plus 2x equals to 12. So we notice that the 12 is on the right side, so we need to move it over to the left side. Since it's positive, once we move it over to the left side, it becomes negative 12, and then it's going to be equal to 0. Before we start to choose the a, b, and c, If you look at the coefficients 4, 2, and 12, notice that we can factor out a common, there's a common factor. So the common factor is going to be 2. So when you factor out 2, you remain with 2x squared plus 6 plus x minus 6 equals to 0. Once you have it in this form, you can divide both sides by 2 and you remain with 2x squared plus x minus 6 equals to 0. So now we can choose A, B, and C. A is positive 2, B is positive 1, and C is negative 6. Once we know those three numbers, we're going to use our quadratic formula, and it's going to be x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 6 divided by 2 times 2. And then now we need to simplify the square root and the denominator. So we're going to have negative 1 plus or minus 1 squared is just going to be 1, and then negative 4 times times 2, it's negative 8, and then 8 times negative 6 is going to be 48. When you add that to 1, you get 49, and then in the denominator you're going to have 4 because 2 times 2 is going to be 4. So now we just need to simplify the square root sign, and we're going to have x equals to negative 1 plus or minus 7 divided by 4. Since it's plus and minus, we're going to have two answers. So x equals to negative 1 plus 7 divided by 4, or x equals to negative 1 minus 7 divided by 4. So let's solve the left side. You're going to have 6 divided by 4, simplify that to 3 over 2, and then now let's solve what's on the right side. You're going to have negative 8 divided by 4, x equals to negative 2. And these are the solutions for this quadratic equation. Alright, here's the pro tip. If you want to be successful in using the quadratic formula, the first thing you gotta do is make sure that all the terms in the expression are in the right order. The first term is always the squared term, and then the linear term comes second, and then the constant term comes third. Identify which term has the A, the B, and the C, and then you can use the quadratic formula. And that is the pro tip. So after working on several examples, here are some independent exercises for you to work on your own. You need to solve each of the equations using the quadratic formula. If you don't remember some of the concepts, you can always go back and watch the video again and then try each exercise. All of the answers are in the description below. Good luck.